Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SRRA Oncology Year-End 2019 and 2020 Outlook Analyst and Investor Call. For information, today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I'll turn the call over to your host today, Dr. Nick Glover. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Nick Glover, President and CEO of SRRA Oncology. Thank you very much for joining us today for our 2019 year-end results and 2020 Outlook conference call. Joining me today are Dr. Barbara Klencke, our Chief Development Officer, Dr. Mark Kowalski, our Chief Medical Officer, Mr. Suki Jagpal, our CFO, and Mr. James Smith, our Vice President, Corporate Affairs. Today, we reported our financial and operational results for the fourth quarter and year ended December 31st, 2019. Copies of our 10-K and press release are available on our website. Before we begin today, I do have to point you to our safe harbor statement. We are a publicly traded NASDAQ-listed company and subject to all of the rules and regulations, risks, uncertainties, and assumptions that are associated with being a public company. We encourage you to review our regulatory filings, and in particular the risk factors that we update from time to time that are contained within those filings, which could cause actual results to differ materially from those described in any forward-looking statements. SRRA undertakes no obligation to update any forward-looking statements to reflect events or circumstances occurring after the date hereof, other than as may be required by applicable law. Additionally, non-GAAP financial measures will be discussed on this conference call. Please refer to the tables in our fourth quarter and year-ended December 31st, 2019 earnings for a reconciliation of these measures to their most directly comparable GAAP financial measure. Unless otherwise noted, all references to financial metrics are presented on a GAAP basis. Okay, on with the call. I'm very pleased to report that we've had a great start to 2020, and our whole team is aligned, working hard, and very excited about the prospects ahead for SRRA, momelotinib, and the MOMENTUM trial. We believe momelotinib could become an important and beneficial option for many, if not most, patients with myelofibrosis, both in the first and second-line settings. This is because momelotinib is the only single-agent drug, as far as we know, capable of meaningfully and robustly treating all three hallmarks of myelofibrosis: anemia, constitutional symptoms, and enlarged spleen. Importantly, momelotinib has potential utility across the entire spectrum of myelofibrosis patients, including the poorly addressed, anemic, and thrombocytopenic first-line patient population, as well as broadly across the second-line myelofibrosis patient population. We're confident in momelotinib's therapeutic profile because we have the benefit of drawing upon the robust body of data obtained from more than 820 myelofibrosis patients who have been treated with momelotinib to date in a number of trials, including SIMPLIFY-1 and SIMPLIFY-2, the two head-to-head phase 3 trials of momelotinib against ruxolitinib in the first and second-line settings, respectively. And as we've noted previously, momelotinib has demonstrated long-term responses, as reinforced by the fact that a sizable number of patients from these and prior clinical trials actively remain on therapy and continue to provide us with valuable durability and safety data, some for up to 8 or 9 years. Our keen focus across SRRA is on achieving regulatory and commercial success with momelotinib. During the fourth quarter of 2019, we launched the MOMENTUM phase 3 clinical trial, setting SRRA on course to deliver anticipated top-line data in late 2021 and positioning momelotinib for potential registration filing in 2022. Our focus now is on activating global clinical trial sites over the coming months and driving enrollment for Momentum, and we look forward to providing ongoing updates on our progress throughout the year. In a moment, I'll ask Dr. Mark Kowalski to briefly discuss the Momentum trial and to provide a status update. It's important to remind everyone of the purpose of the Momentum clinical trial. Given the breadth and depth of our extant clinical data, Momentum has been designed to confirm, in a statistically compelling manner, the array of clinical benefits that I previously outlined. As we look ahead to the potential registration of momelotinib, it's important to remember that we intend to file the totality of data from all 3 phase 3 studies, Simplify 1, Simplify 2, and Momentum, in our regulatory package. Fortunately, you won't have to wait until we file our regulatory submissions to see the orientation of the Simplify data. While top-line findings from the Simplify studies have been previously disclosed, both of these studies continue to mature, and SRRA has endeavored to more robustly and thoroughly interrogate these substantial sets of evolving data. We've already started to present these new data in the public domain, and throughout 2020, we are planning for the additional dissemination of emerging data from the Simplify trials that further highlight momelotinib's differentiated durability, safety, and efficacy profile. After Mark, I'll call on Dr. Barbara Klenke to elaborate on this and provide an overview of our plans for data disclosure in 2020. Finally, in January 2020, we completed what has been a transformative process at SRRA, culminating in a substantive financing that we believe provides us with the resources and capital structure appropriate to support the momelotinib program as we prepare for its potential registration and commercialization. We're fortunate to have built both a healthy balance sheet and a critical mass of high-quality, supportive stockholders, including Vivo Capital, Longitude Capital, OrbiMed, and Abingworth. In addition, we recently welcomed Gilead to the SRRA family, which become a stockholder in the company in consideration for meaningfully reduced royalty rates and elimination of a near-term milestone that would have been payable under the terms of our asset purchase agreement for momelotinib. Later in our call, I'll ask our CFO, Suki Jagpal, to provide a brief overview of our finances as they now stand. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Kowalski, who can provide an update on the Momentum trial.
Thank you, Nick. First, as Nick mentioned, Momentum is a phase 3 pivotal trial whose purpose is to confirm the therapeutic benefits of momelotinib as previously demonstrated in the Simplify study. Let me tell you about a number of the key features of the Momentum study. First, let me introduce the study's chief investigator, Dr. Serge Verstovchik. Serge is chief, Section for Myeloproliferative Neoplasms, the Department of Leukemia, Division of Cancer Medicine at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. Dr. Verstovchik is a world-renowned clinician scientist in the myeloproliferative neoplasm field. Dr. Verstovchik has been the principal investigator for more than 50 clinical trials testing novel therapies for patients with multiple forms of myeloproliferative neoplasms, including myelofibrosis. And he has also published over 400 peer-reviewed manuscripts and is the recipient of numerous prestigious awards in the field. Moreover, Dr. Verstovchik has been involved in the development of really most of the investigational and approved agents for the treatment of myelofibrosis, including the development of the standard of care agent ruxolitinib, for which he was the U.S. lead investigator. In particular, Serge has been involved in the development of momelotinib since back to 2011, both as an advisor to SRRA and as a clinical investigator, and he has previously gone on record stating the following. Ruxolitinib may control the signs and symptoms of the disease for some time, but it doesn't prevent progression. Next, the leading cause of loss of response that has been published is anemia. The majority of patients need another agent to salvage their quality of life, to control spleen symptoms, and to improve the anemia if possible. And lastly, momelotinib, unlike any other JAK inhibitor, can benefit patients to a great extent on all three aspects of the disease. So in addition, Dr. Versavchik, we are expecting many other notable myelofibrosis key opinion leaders to be active contributors to the success of the MOMENTUM study, many of whom have participated in prior momelotinib clinical trials. These include Dr. Ruben Mesa, Dr. Claire Harrison, Dr. Vikas Gupta, Dr. Jean-Jacques Kalajian, Dr. Francesco Passamonte, and Dr. Alessandro Vanucci, among others. We believe the stature and standing of these clinicians in the international myelofibrosis community is a testament to the broad interest and support for momelotinib that continues to exist and build. So what about the actual study design? In brief, MOMENTUM has been designed in order to demonstrate statistically compelling and clinically meaningful outcomes across all three domains of myelofibrosis. First, alleviating the debilitating symptomatic burden these patients face, which often leads to a very poor quality of life for patients with advanced myelofibrosis. Second, addressing the chronic anemia that impacts all aspects of these patients' lives, encompassing reducing or eliminating the common requirement for frequent blood transfusions many patients suffer through, in turn potentially helping these patients can lead to fuller and more active lives. And third, improving the painfully enlarged spleen that manifests in myelofibrosis as a consequence of the impaired red blood cell production that typifies the disease. So in order to achieve these outcomes, MOMENTUM has been designed as follows. The study population is focused on demonstrably symptomatic and anemic patients that have been previously treated with an approved JAK inhibitor. Specifically, that would be patients that were previously treated with either ruxolitinib or fedratinib. The comparator agent is danazol. Now, danazol is an androgenic steroid, and it is included in the NCCN and ESMO treatment guidelines as an appropriate therapy to treat the anemia observed in myelofibrosis. The study will enroll 180 patients in a double-blind randomization design. The randomization will be 2-to-1 momelotinib to danazol over a 24-week randomized treatment phase. Following that randomized treatment phase, patients who were randomized to danazol are able to switch onto momelotinib treatment for an extended treatment period. Now, it's important to stress that the design of MOMENTUM is the culmination of a process of productive and constructive dialogue with the FDA, and it reflects their views on how to optimally drive momelotinib towards potential approval. Specifically, based on FDA input, the primary study endpoint for the MOMENTUM study is the total symptom score at week 24. This endpoint reflects the improvement in symptomatic burden from baseline to week 24 that we would expect to see for patients treated with momelotinib in this cohort based on data we obtained in the SIMPLIFY studies, both of which showed a very consistent and noteworthy symptom improvement. Importantly, this primary endpoint is highly powered at 99%. A number of secondary endpoints in MOMENTUM address momelotinib's unique anemia benefit and its ability to eliminate or reduce transfusion burden. For instance, the next endpoint to be measured after symptom improvement is the transfusion independence rate at week 24. This specific endpoint was chosen as it is relevant to all myelofibrosis patients, including those with frequent, those with occasional, or no need for blood transfusions, and is powered at 90%. Other anemia-related endpoints focus on measuring the anemia benefit in a variety of ways, including the transfusion-dependent to independent conversion rate. We presented at the ASH conference in December of 2019 data from the Simplify-1 study detailing several novel measurements of anemia benefit, including relative odds of being transfusion independent and the cumulative transfusion burden on study. And we will measure these endpoints in momentum as well. And last, we are also measuring the splenic response at week 24. As a reminder, to date, momelotinib is the only agent to have been studied head-to-head versus ruxolitinib. And in the Simplify-1 study, momelotinib met the primary endpoint of non-inferior splenic response rate versus ruxolitinib, demonstrating that in JAK inhibitor-naive patients, that the two agents have comparable spleen benefit. The spleen response endpoint in momentum is powered at 90%. So the key message for momentum is that the study is designed to confirm the therapeutic benefits of momelotinib across the three main hallmarks of disease: constitutional symptoms, anemia, and enlarged spleen, and that it is then powered for success. As for the status of the trial, momentum is being conducted as a true global study. We estimate that to enroll 180 patients, that it will take approximately 18 months. And then, following a 24-week randomized treatment period, top-line data is expected in Q4 of 2021. SRRA was pleased to report at ASH in 2019 in December that the study had officially launched. We are currently in the process of activating sites across North America, Europe, and the Asia-Pacific region. We are pleased with the study conduct to date. We are making very good progress with regulatory approvals to conduct the study on an individual country-by-country basis, as well as across specific investigational sites within those countries. We expect to see this positive cadence continue as these operational activities mature through 2020. Everything remains on track. We expect, based on our current timelines, to complete enrollment around mid-2021, and as mentioned, top-line data are expected in Q4 of 2021. As we announced in May 2019, we have been granted fast-track status by the FDA. So we will certainly take advantage of the opportunity for frequent communications with the FDA. Overall, we are targeting a filing date of Q2 2022. As a result, potential regulatory approval in the U.S. could be as early as Q4 2022, assuming priority regulatory review. Obviously, we'll keep everyone informed as we make progress toward these dates. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Klenke. Barb?
Thank you, Mark. As you can see, the trial is moving forward positively, and it's just a matter of time until we expect to have top-line data. We look forward to continuing to provide ongoing updates on our progress with momentum throughout the year. As we've stated here, enrolling momentum is the near-term focus of the company. However, as we mentioned earlier, it's also important to remember that it will be the totality of the momelotinib data that will drive our planned regulatory submission. And that includes data from the Simplify-1 and Simplify-2 trials, in addition to the data from the Momentum trial. Indeed, we designed Momentum to confirm the array of positive durable benefits that we have observed with momelotinib in the previous studies, which reveal a unique breadth of clinical benefits. Towards that end, we anticipate having a robust flow of emerging data to report throughout 2020 and 2021 from our prior clinical experience with momelotinib. I'll provide a flavor of some of these planned disclosures now. As you may know, momelotinib is a potent and selective inhibitor of JAK1, JAK2, and ACVR1. These three targets underpin momelotinib's ability to address the three key hallmark features of myelofibrosis. ACVR1, sometimes known as ALK2 in the literature, is a critical component of momelotinib's profile. And just for clarity, as we've been asked this question on occasion, momelotinib does have pronounced activity against ACVR1, possessing low nanomolar inhibitory potency. That is, it has comparable biologic potency against all three of the targets that it inhibits, JAK1, JAK2, and ACVR1. But I'll return to ACVR1 in a few minutes. As a reminder, in aggregate, there is an exceedingly rich clinical trial database of both safety and efficacy outcome data for momelotinib in the treatment of myelofibrosis, with more than 820 patients with myelofibrosis treated to date. This is one of the most comprehensive data sets in the field, and momelotinib has shown remarkably consistent treatment effects across all of these studies that have been conducted. Many of these patients are still on therapy today, with quite a few patients continuing to benefit 6, 7, 8, and even 9 years out since the initiation of momelotinib, continuing to receive continuous daily dosing. The vast majority of these long-term responders remain on full-dose momelotinib. This really underpins the durability of benefits, the tolerability of the drug, and the lack of cumulative toxicity. The available data includes two key phase 3 studies, Simplify-1 and Simplify-2, which were conducted in the JAK inhibitor naive and in the previously JAK inhibitor treated patient populations, respectively. In both studies, ruxolitinib, which is the existing standard of care in myelofibrosis and a multi-billion-dollar commercial success, was the comparator. In these direct head-to-head assessments, momelotinib more than held up to scrutiny versus ruxolitinib, achieving clinically comparable or superior benefits to ruxolitinib across clinical endpoints encompassing symptomatic benefit, shrinkage of enlarged spleen, and clear superiority on a variety of anemia endpoints. Simplify-1 and Simplify-2 represent a continuum of myelofibrosis patients with intermediate and high-risk disease, as assessed by the common prognostic scales used to triage patient treatment. Recognizing this, in aggregate, the Simplify data reflect a broad survey of myelofibrosis, and in totality, we believe these data support that momelotinib demonstrates a unique breadth of clinical benefit and, in our view, delivers a greater overall breadth of clinical utility than does ruxolitinib. As such, momelotinib has a potential important role to play in the treatment of this disease, assuming the drug is approved. Of course, it is momelotinib's ability to address the chronic and progressive anemia of myelofibrosis that is a key differentiator of the agent. A significant proportion of myelofibrosis patients develop anemia, with many becoming dependent on frequent blood transfusions. The anemia of inflammation, which typifies the anemia found in myelofibrosis, is a dynamic, complex process characterized by high levels of hepcidin and increased inflammatory cytokines, along with decreased serum iron and decreased hemoglobin. Indeed, Dr. Verstovchuk, that Mark alluded to earlier, has commented on this in the public domain, noting that, quote, anemia is a major area of unmet need. That's one of the major problems. A quarter of these patients at the beginning may require transfusion, and after 1 year of therapy, almost half of patients already require transfusion. Anemia and transfusion dependency are important prognostic factors, unquote. While progress has been made in treating the splenomegaly and the hypercatabolic symptoms in the era of JAK inhibitors, anemia remains the major untreated negative determinant of myelofibrosis-related quality of life and is a key negative prognostic factor in overall survival. Currently approved JAK inhibitor therapies are myelosuppressive, and thus they exacerbate anemia and transfusion dependency. Momelotinib, in contrast, has a unique mechanistic-driven anemia benefit. This occurs via the inhibition of ACVR1 and is demonstrated by an immediate and sustained clinical benefit evidenced by increases in hemoglobin and an array of additional anemia benefits. But why is ACVR1 so fundamentally important in myelofibrosis, and why is it such an attractive therapeutic target? Well, it's because of the systemic inflammation in myelofibrosis that leads to an increase in ACVR1 activity, thus increasing the secretion of hepcidin. This results in a perturbed iron homeostasis and an iron-restricted anemia. Momelotinib's inhibition of ACVR1 leads to a reduction in hepcidin, a restoration of iron homeostasis, a restoration of red cell production, and an alleviation of the anemia and transfusion dependency. We have shown data demonstrating these anemia benefits in the public domain previously. They encompass transfusion independence, a conversion from transfusion dependency to transfusion independency, and a variety of measures related to transfusion frequency. Intriguingly, certain patients that were followed also show an improvement in bone marrow fibrosis, albeit that was not a key focus of the SIMPLIFY studies. Further, in the ASH meeting in Orlando last December, that's the American Society of Hematology meeting, new analyses of red blood cell transfusion data from SIMPLIFY-1 were presented in a poster by Dr. Ruben Nessa. He's a world-renowned expert in myelofibrosis and the director of the Mays Cancer Center at the UT Health System San Antonio MD Anderson Cancer Center. These analyses demonstrated that patients who received ruxolitinib had a significantly increased transfusion requirement compared to those treated with momelotinib, including a nearly 10-fold higher odds of receiving transfusions during a 24-week study period. In other words, according to these data, a typical myelofibrosis patient is very likely to be transfused if they receive ruxolitinib and far less likely to be transfused on momelotinib. This is clinically important, and Nick will come back to this later as he outlines our initial commercial positioning. We're very fortunate to have such a rich data set from the SIMPLIFY studies that continue to mature, with many patients still receiving active therapy after many years since starting the trial, demonstrating the durable efficacy and consistently well-tolerated safety profile. In 2020, we plan to continue to reinforce momelotinib's overall clinical profile with additional dissemination of data and associated publications from these studies, with a focus on quantifying the previously unreported durability, the long-term safety and dose intensity data that I spoke of earlier, as well as other features of momelotinib's benefit, including a deep dive into the robust symptom improvement observed in both SIMPLIFY studies. Momelotinib's demonstrated durability is noteworthy. In the real world, various publications indicate that the median time on ruxolitinib therapy for myelofibrosis patients can be in the range of 7 to 12 months. We believe our data, to be published later this year, stands in contrast to these findings, with most patients on active therapy for at least a couple of years or longer. Moreover, because we're not as myelosuppressive as other JAK inhibitors, patients generally maintain a full dose of momelotinib, achieving full benefit of the agent for extended periods of time. A striking finding from the SIMPLIFY studies is how challenging it is to maintain full dose ruxolitinib with frequent dose adjustments necessary due to intolerability from profound cytopenia. Indeed, our overall safety profile remains very favorable, as you'll see later this year, even when dosing out to several years. We're also conducting, as I mentioned, sophisticated analyses of the symptom data obtained from the SIMPLIFY studies, and we're generating data that we believe will be persuasive to reinforcing the magnitude of the clinical improvement on symptom burden and showing that it's comparable for momelotinib and ruxolitinib in the JAK inhibitor naive population. This recognizes, of course, that the SIMPLIFY-2 study has already shown that we are superior head-to-head to ruxolitinib on symptom improvement for advanced patients. And thus we believe our post-hoc analyses of the symptom improvement in the first-line setting show that momelotinib is at least as good, if not better, on symptoms when one looks across the entire intermediate and high-risk patient population represented by the totality of the SIMPLIFY data. Not only will these new analyses contribute further to the overall submission package for these future registration of momelotinib, but as we roll out the data, we believe that these data will serve to help build broader awareness for momelotinib in the clinical community. We expect to publish these data later this year. I'm going to hand this back to Nick, who has a few comments on the market opportunity now.
Thanks, Barb. That was a very nice preview of the new data disclosures that you can expect from SRRA in 2020, which we believe will further reinforce the unique profile of the compound. I just want to take a couple of minutes to quickly overview the market opportunity that we believe momelotinib's profile could potentially address. SRRA has been engaged by a third party in a sophisticated review of the current and evolving myelofibrosis market. In particular, we've been testing how, on a blinded basis, momelotinib's profile resonates with the clinical community. Although this market research continues, we've been exceedingly pleased with the receptivity that we have heard to date. Before previewing this analysis, let's set the stage. There are about 50,000 patients living with myelofibrosis, and about 75% of them are intermediate high risk, same population of the SIMPLIFY trials. Conservatively, about 70% of these patients receive first-line treatment, perhaps more, of which about 25% are already transfusion-dependent. As we've stressed previously, transfusion-dependent is a chronic and progressive culmination of the anemia of this disease. Even in the naive population, many patients are already transfusion-dependent as they first receive therapy. Recognizing that about 70% of intermediate high-risk myelofibrosis patients have some form of anemia, and so it's not too surprising that many other patients who aren't actually transfusion-dependent are well on the way, having moderate to severe anemia and perhaps having occasional blood transfusions. These are patients that are not going to do well on other JAK inhibitors. We estimate that about 75% of patients will require second-line therapy after a first-line current JAK inhibitor, and over half of these will be demonstrably transfusion-dependent, with many others getting occasional transfusions or on the cusp of needing them. The majority of patients in the second-line setting, by definition, will be moderately to severely anemic. Some of the comments we've been hearing from the clinical community reinforce how an agent with momelotinib's profile is optimally positioned to address unmet medical needs in myelofibrosis. For instance, one U.S. high-volume prescriber noted, quote, "The dual mechanism and clinical data point to a strong anemia benefit, so I would definitely look to prescribe this in my frontline patients who have severe anemia," end quote. Similarly, a European KOL agreed and stated, quote, "Transfusions can be a major problem for patients, and this product shows a clear benefit for transfusion independence in all studies. So I would use it in the majority of my frontline patients with severe anemia," end quote. In the second-line setting, Dr. Vostovchek, who we introduced earlier, has stated on record that 3/4 of the patients would be candidates for second-line therapy. The majority of patients in second-line would potentially be candidates for momelotinib. In summary, we believe that momelotinib has the potential for commercial uptake in both the first-line and second-line settings, with its use tailored to the unmet needs that exist in both populations. We believe that momelotinib has the potential to be a commercially successful agent on the basis of its differentiated profile, encompassing both the breadth of benefit on symptom burden, enlarged spleen, and critically, cytopenias. Both our ability to directly address anemia and transfusion burden, but also how we spare or improve platelets. Moreover, as you will hear more of later in 2020, our durability of response has been noteworthy. There have been no emergent or cumulative toxicities of note, and our ability to maintain full dose intensity has been markedly superior to ruxolitinib in a head-to-head setting. In summary, there are obvious unmet medical needs in myelofibrosis, and we believe momelotinib is uniquely positioned to potentially address these. Given that responses to momelotinib are notably durable, given that this is a chronic and progressive disease characterized by a life expectancy extended over many years, and you start to get an appreciation of why we're so encouraged by the commercial prospects for momelotinib. We intend to further elaborate on the commercial opportunity as we move further towards potential registration. Let's move on for now. Suki, can you provide a quick summary of our finances, please?
Sure, thanks, Nick. Good morning, everyone. I will provide some key financial highlights for the year and ask that you refer to our annual 10-K filing and our earnings release for further details. During 2019, cash used in operating activities totaled $51.2 million. Operating expenses for the year ended December 31st, 2019, totaled approximately $67 million compared to $55.4 million for the prior year. However, note that the 2019 operating expenses included a $10.5 million non-cash R&D charge related to our obligation to issue common stock and a warrant to Gilead in consideration for meaningfully reduced royalty rates and elimination of a near-term milestone payment. Including this $10.5 million non-cash charge, R&D expenses increased by $12.2 million from $41.1 million to $52.3 million for the year ended December 31st, 2019, as compared to the prior year. Momelotinib-related R&D costs, which include clinical trial and development costs and third-party manufacturing costs, increased by approximately $14.7 million in 2019 versus the prior year. These costs were partially offset by $11.4 million decrease in SRRA-737 and SRRA-141 costs related to clinical trials, third-party manufacturing, and research and preclinical work. G&A expenses decreased from $14.3 million to $13.7 million for the year ended December 31st. As compared to the prior year. GAAP net loss for the year ended December 31st, 2019, totaled $88.3 million compared to $53.3 million for the prior year. Note, however, our 2019 net loss includes the previously mentioned non-cash $10.5 million charge related to the Gilead amendment and a $20.9 million charge included in other income expenses related to a change in fair value of warrant liabilities. Non-GAAP adjusted net loss for the year ended December 31st, 2019, totaled $51.2 million compared to $36.5 million for the prior year. Please refer to our earnings release for further details on the reconciliation of GAAP to non-GAAP financial measures. Now, turning over to our balance sheet. In the fourth quarter of 2019, we bolstered our cash position by raising $103 million of gross proceeds in an underwritten equity offering. Net proceeds, after deducting underwriting and offering expenses, totaled $97.7 million. We also fully repaid our $5 million term loan in December 2019 and terminated our debt facility. As a result, we closed the year with a cash and cash equivalents total of $147.5 million compared to $106 million as of December 31st, 2018. While we don't guide on monthly or quarterly burn rate, we anticipate our current resources will be sufficient to execute on our development strategy for momelotinib into the second half of 2022. I would also like to point out that the Series B warrants issued in the November 2019 financing are only cash exercisable and expire on the 75th day anniversary following the announcement of top-line data from the Momentum Phase 3 trial. If these Series B warrants are fully exercised, we will receive approximately $34 million in additional proceeds to further extend our runway. I will add a few more comments on the amendment of our asset purchase agreement with Gilead, which we completed in the fourth quarter of 2019. The improved agreement and commitment from Gilead has meaningfully enhanced the potential long-term value of momelotinib for Sierra and our stockholders. Gilead is now a stockholder in Sierra, and the blended annual royalty rates payable to Gilead, should momelotinib prove commercially successful, have been substantially reduced. Net royalties now range from very low double digits for sub-$1 billion in sales to teens for greater than $1 billion in sales. We also eliminated a milestone payment that would have been due to Gilead upon the initiation of Momentum, further extending our financial resources. In summary, we are now appropriately capitalized to advance momelotinib towards potential registration and commercialization, and have a solid base of aligned and committed stakeholders who, like us, share our enthusiasm for the potential for momelotinib as outlined today. In concert with our financing, we also welcome new board members associated with Depot Capital, Longitude Capital, OrbiMed, and Avingworth.
Thanks, Suki. Okay, look, so in summary, primary objective here is to secure regulatory approval for momelotinib on the most expedient timeline. Primary registration strategy is via a single pivotal confirmatory Phase 3 trial, the Momentum trial, oriented to start demonstrating meaningful clinical benefit in the second-line myelofibrosis setting. We've launched Momentum and are keenly focused on recruitment for the study. Moreover, we're advancing a concerted and holistic overarching strategic, regulatory, and commercial strategy to optimize and maximize the opportunity that we believe momelotinib represents. Our emerging view of the myelofibrosis market is that momelotinib is ideally positioned to address unmet medical needs broadly in myelofibrosis, including in the anemic and thrombocytopenic populations. It's also arguably an appropriate backbone JAK inhibitor for emerging combination therapies. To date, no standalone agent, available, emerging, or in development, has demonstrated robustly compelling data across all three myelofibrosis hallmarks except for momelotinib. In context of a well-capitalized firm with a stellar slate of stakeholders, sophisticated investors, and Gilead, and running a highly powered Phase 3 clinical trial for a potentially valuable commercial asset, we believe Sierra is very well positioned. With that, I'm pleased to turn over the call to our analysts to ask questions of management. Operator, can we have the first question, please?
Most certainly, Dr. Glover. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask an audio question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Today's first question is coming from Maury Raycroft, calling from Jefferies. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and congrats on the progress. Thanks for taking my question. So just checking on momelotinib's Momentum status. So if you can mention how many sites have been activated and are recruiting currently, and what specifics can you provide around expectations for the cadence of site rollout and patient enrollment to get to that 180 number by mid-2021?
Yeah, thanks, Maury. As you can appreciate, we're not anticipating providing a blow-by-blow of site activation and enrollment status. We'll be guiding towards the overall timelines that we've provided today. But, of course, you get a flavor of where we were by checking clinicaltrials.gov. But, of course, I'm stressing where we were because clinicaltrials.gov is always a little bit behind by necessity from where we actually are in the real world. Now, if you look at clinicaltrials.gov right now, I think you'll see that there are a number of countries that are now cleared from a regulatory perspective, and a number of sites that are activated. And you'd expect to see that continue to grow dramatically over the next couple of months. As Mark alluded to, everything remains very much on track. Very pleased with the progress through on a country-by-country basis, the regulatory process. We're very much focused now on site activations and on driving enrollment and recruitment. So I think the study is off to a great start. We feel very confident in meeting those timelines.
Got it. Okay. And then second question is just for the extended access phase 2 for momelotinib. If you can provide an update as to how many patients are still in that study, do you collect data from those patients? And will that study be a source of new data that could be disclosed over the course of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to provide a blow-by-blow on where that study currently is. I think we'll provide some general updates through the year. We had 120 patients still on study as of the last update, and that obviously reflects, as Bob alluded to, many years on therapy for patients. Recognizing that the simplified trials would be the last point of enrollment, and those trials initiated several years ago. So patients from Simplify are already 4, 5, 6 years out in that extended access protocol. It's an important study for us, and that's why we stress it. At the end of the day, what regulators want to see is you have demonstrable activity, yes, but that activity is durable. And we have a very impressive data set here in terms of long-term durability. As Bob alluded to, that data set will be the source of publications to look for in 2020 and beyond as we provide more clarity on specific metrics on time on study, durability on study, the safety over long-term periods of time, etc. So do stay tuned. That's an important data set for us, Maury. We think it's a real ace in our hand.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for taking my questions. I'll hop back into you.
Okay, thanks, Maury.
Thanks, Mr. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you have any questions, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. We have a question now coming in from Mr. Sam Slutsky, calling in from Life SI Capital. Please go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the question. Could you just remind us quickly again on the role of danazol in the current MS treatment paradigm and then how that being a comparator might impact or benefit the enrollment of the momentum study?
Sure. Mark, Bob, do you guys want to jump in on that? Maybe Mark?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, danazol is an androgenic steroid. Its main utility in the treatment of myelofibrosis patients, and as recommended by the guidelines, is to treat the anemia associated with myelofibrosis. There is relatively limited published data on danazol, but what we do see is that it will have a limited benefit in sort of earlier stage patients with myelofibrosis on their anemia, being an androgenic steroid. We don't expect it to have a major benefit on the splenic enlargement and the symptoms, but there is limited data, but that's also confirmed from clinicians which we have spoken to who have used danazol. So we realize we've accommodated this in the study design by allowing, for instance, should patients have splenic progression on danazol because of its lack of benefit, then if they have symptomatic splenic progression, then we accommodate that in the study design by allowing them to cross over early to momelotinib. So, we've spoken to our clinicians. We've gotten assurances from them, given the objectives of the trial, that it's a viable comparator, and the study design accommodates it as well.
Yeah, so I'll just, this is Barbara, just emphasizing that it's as placebo-like as you can get. It has no mechanistic ability to control the spleen size or the inflammatory symptoms associated with myelofibrosis. So it truly is, as Mark said, a therapy that's been recommended for the management of anemia, which is only one of the manifestations of myelofibrosis. And where it's been published to provide an anemia benefit has been in a patient population that's much earlier than what we're enrolling into the MOMENTUM study. The fact that it's very close to a placebo, essentially, means that we need to use other levers to encourage patients to enroll, to encourage physicians to enroll their patients, and those include 2-to-1 randomization to momelotinib. It includes crossover, as Mark alluded to. So as we've talked about the durability and the long-term benefits of momelotinib, it's very important for patients, for potential patients, to realize that should they actually get randomized to danazol, and in fact they won't know, it's a double-blind study, so nobody will know who's on what therapy, but no matter which arm a patient is enrolled to, they do get to cross over at 24 weeks, if not earlier, and then they have the opportunity to continue to benefit for potentially years, as we've seen in other study settings. So this design gives us absolutely the highest probability of success. This will allow momelotinib to show a magnitude of benefit over a very weak anemia agent, and show dramatic benefit on the other manifestations, symptoms, and spleen. So it allows us to have a high probability of achieving success with the endpoint, and it allows patients the opportunity to receive momelotinib potentially for years, no matter which arm they are enrolled to.
Got it. That's helpful. And then lastly, we touched on it during the call, but in terms of the potential for momelotinib in the first-line population, what portion of patients in the first line typically experience anemia or thrombocytopenia that impacts their ability to grow?
Yeah, some of the quotes that we highlighted today during the call serve as a potential reflection of the frequency of anemia. You know, myelofibrosis is a disease of the bone marrow, and anemia is one of the most common presenting symptoms. So unexplained anemia, enlarged spleen being another one, but unexplained anemia is often how patients come to light. And if, as patients enter the intermediate and higher risk categories of this disease, I believe Dr. Verstovchek's quote said a quarter of patients are transfusion dependent at the time of diagnosis, and half of patients become transfusion dependent over the course of the first year of therapy for this disease. So it's clearly one of the most important factors. It's common, it's prognostically important, it's not treatable by any direct means in any other way. Momelotinib has this unique mechanistically driven anemia benefit as a unique differentiated component of its profile.
Just to emphasize, a quarter. Oh no, go ahead.
No, please, Mark. Here you go.
No, I was just going to say quarter may be estimated to be transfusion dependent, but an additional percentage of those patients are still anemic, and it's progressive. So as you've heard, as they proceed, they will become eventually transfusion dependent. So that opens up the door, I think, for use in patients who are moving in the direction of transfusion dependence, but who may just have significant anemia and not meet that definition.
I was going to echo the same point. I mean, using our empirical data from Simplify-1, 25% were demonstrably transfusion dependent, and about another 10% plus were receiving infrequent transfusions but were not transfusion free. So about a third of the patients were getting some form of transfusions, either occasional or frequent, in the naive setting in Simplify-1. And you asked about thrombocytopenia, and interestingly, and perhaps not surprisingly, those things are usually synonymous. It's very rare, certainly in our data, and if you look through the literature, to see a patient who's demonstrably thrombocytopenic that isn't anemic. Those two things go hand in hand. So the majority of patients in our data, and I'm talking 800 patients of myelofibrosis data here, so it's a very large data set, in our hands, myelofibrosis, anemia, and thrombocytopenia are coincident. And Gilead did a number of studies in their commercial preparatory work a couple of years ago that reinforced this, and we've actually presented some of those data in the public domain previously, and we'll continue to update this as we move forward. But I would argue that the cytopenic population is the population that we would be focused on, and those patients will have anemia and thrombocytopenia. And it's important to remember that we spare platelets, and in fact, in a percentage of patients, especially those who showed a demonstrable anemia benefit on momelotinib, they also saw an increase in platelets as well. So I think we're ideally positioned for that cytopenic patient population, and maybe that's about a third of front line, it's the majority of second line.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you much, sir. We'll now go to Suzanne Turkchan, calling in from Oppenheimer. Please go ahead.
My question on for Jay Olson. Could you please characterize your partnership with Gilead a little bit more and give us some color of what may have led to them trading a royalty rate for an equity stake?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, we enjoy a very productive relationship with Gilead from Andy Dickinson down. Andy's been incredibly supportive of the relationship, and I have nothing but praise for the Gilead team. They recognize that we need to get momelotinib to the finish line for Gilead to realize sort of any commercial outcome. Obviously, if we don't get the drug registered, then it's worth nothing. If we get the drug registered, then it could be worth something considerably more. And we needed to ensure that we capitalized the company to get there and that we executed as quickly as possible. And they wanted to be helpful to make that happen. They recognized that a reshaping of the economics to ensure that they still share in the upside, which they will as a stakeholder, direct equity holder in the company. They hold about 7% of the stock in the company now, as well as still getting reasonable royalty return, but obviously far less attractive than it was previously. Gives them the best chance of seeing a long-term benefit from momelotinib and sharing in the success of the company as we move forward. So I think it was a win-win.
Great. Thanks. And I think we might see one or two more data sets from BET inhibitors this year. Could you just tell us, what are the important characteristics of data that you will present this year with contrast to those agents or other combinations that we might see in this space?
I can't comment on other people's data sets, especially ones that I'm not sure what they're oriented to. I mean, I think the reality as I currently understand it to be is that in the frontline setting, the BET inhibitor combinations are largely focused on patients with robust cytology, so good thrombocyte counts, good hemoglobin, and that's where ruxolitinib plays the best. Let's be frank. If you have relatively robust hematology, ruxolitinib is a good drug. We're not pretending otherwise, nor are we pretending that we would try and displace Rux in that area. I think what we're focused on is where the unmet needs are. So these are the patients who are anemic and thrombocytopenic. Those two things, as I said, are synonymous. That's our sweet spot in the front line. And I don't think anyone else is going to be playing there as robustly as we are. When it comes to the second line setting, I think everything's on the table for the same reasons. The majority of these patients are both anemic and thrombocytopenic. But those are ideal patients for momelotinib. I'd love to see momelotinib studied with a BET inhibitor. I'd like to see how those biologies complement. We do have some intriguing preclinical findings that reinforce, again, how different ruxolitinib and momelotinib are. We do not behave the same biologically for a variety of reasons. And in particular, we've shown some preclinical data on the TGF-beta pathway that are very interesting that you just don't see with ruxolitinib. So I think biologically that combination will be very interesting to study, and we're hopeful that we can at some point. I think, and stressed this before, if we can get momelotinib approved, and I think it could be used as a backbone JAK inhibitor in a variety of combination settings, and I'd love to see that happen.
Great. Thank you so much, and congrats again.
Okay, thanks. I think unfortunately we'll have to start wrapping it up now. It is 9 o'clock. I've just got a couple of closing comments.
Thank you. So there are no further questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, great. All right, well, look, before concluding, I'd like to remind everyone that we do have a presentation scheduled for tomorrow at the Cowen Healthcare Conference in Boston, 10 o'clock Eastern. We'll also be making ourselves available for scheduled meetings with investors who are participating at Cowen. Our presentation at Cowen will be webcast live, be available on archive on our website, along with an archive of this call. Of course, there's lots of opportunities to engage with management, so please do reach out to James Smith if you have additional questions or comments or want to schedule a meeting with management. Thanks again for joining the call today. This concludes the call, and we look forward to lots of updates through 2020, an exciting year for Sierra. Thank you.
Thank you much, Dr. Glover. Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude today's presentation. Thank you for your attendance. You may now disconnect. Have a good day.